In 2014, Uber took a 25% cut of every fare. Forbes called it unprecedented, the highest commission the company had ever charged. Today, that number sits around 40% on average, and on some individual rides, it climbs past 65. The company that promised to democratize income now captures more of each transaction than the worker performing it. And here's the part nobody talks about. This wasn't a bug in the gig economy's design. It was the design. The platform economy is often pitched as liberation. Be your own boss, set your own hours, turn your car into a money printer. Over 70 million Americans now participate in some form of gig work, roughly 36% of the total workforce. The global gig economy generates an estimated $3.8 trillion in annual revenue. Those are real numbers, but they obscure a mechanism that, once you see it, changes how you understand the entire model. Here's the architecture. A traditional employer hires a worker, pays them a wage, and absorbs the operating costs of that work: equipment, insurance, workspace, downtime between tasks. The employer takes on risk in exchange for control over how value gets produced. That's the deal. It's been the deal for over a century. Platform companies rewrote that deal. They kept the control. The algorithm decides who gets work, when, at what price, but transferred virtually all operating costs back to the worker. You supply the car. You pay for gas, insurance, maintenance, depreciation. You cover your own healthcare, your own retirement, your own taxes. The platform provides a matching algorithm and a payment processor. For that, it initially took 10%, then 20%, then 25%. Then it stopped publishing the number altogether. In 2022, the meta shifted. Both major rideshare platforms introduced what they called upfront pricing. The name sounds reasonable, but what it actually did was decouple what the passenger pays from what the driver receives. Before this change, the platform took a set commission, a visible percentage of the fare. After the change, the platform uses algorithmic pricing to independently calculate two numbers: what to charge the rider and what to pay the driver. There is no longer any fixed relationship between the two. Think about that as a system design. The platform now has complete information asymmetry. It knows what both sides will accept, and it sets both prices using proprietary data that neither side can audit. The result? Uber booked over $3 billion in free cash flow in 2023, then more than doubled it to $7 billion in 2024. Meanwhile, the average Uber driver earned less in 2024 than the year before, while working more hours. This is the mechanism most gig economy coverage misses. The conversation usually centers on flexibility versus stability. Do workers want freedom or do they want benefits? That's a real question, but it's also a distraction from the structural issue. The structural issue is that platform economics created a system where the intermediary captures an increasing share of value over time, while the workers providing the actual service absorb an increasing share of cost. Let's run the math that most gig workers never see in the recruitment ads. A full-time rideshare driver completing 20 rides a day at an average of $8 per ride grosses about $160. That's $800 a week before expenses. Now, subtract fuel, vehicle maintenance, insurance, and depreciation. Real daily take-home drops to somewhere between $75 and $100. That's $400 to $500 a week. Set aside another 20 to 30% for self-employment taxes, and you're looking at roughly $400 a week, about $14 to $15 an hour net, in a job that requires you to own and operate a depreciating asset. That's not earning. That's grinding, burning through resources faster than you're accumulating them and mistaking activity for progress. For delivery drivers, the picture is similar. Gross hourly pay runs $15 to $22 depending on the platform, the market, and the shift. But expenses eat $4 to $7 per hour. Net pay lands somewhere around $13 to $17 an hour. Goldman Sachs research found that employed gig workers earn about 2/3 as much per hour as they would in a traditional job. Unemployed workers turning to gig platforms earn roughly half. Now here's where the system design gets genuinely interesting. These platforms didn't just shift costs to workers. They built a labor architecture with no natural wage floor. In a traditional employment market, there's friction. Hiring is expensive, training is expensive, turnover is expensive. Those costs create a baseline incentive for employers to retain workers and maintain livable wages, because replacing people is costly. Gig platforms eliminated that friction entirely. Onboarding a new driver takes days, not months. There is no training cost, no severance, no institutional knowledge to preserve. The platform doesn't need any specific driver. It needs a supply of drivers. That distinction matters enormously because it means the platform has no structural incentive to protect individual worker earnings. If one driver leaves because the pay isn't enough, 3 more sign up tomorrow. This is the exploit at the center of the gig economy. In gaming terms, the platform found an infinite resource spawn. Labor supply is functionally unlimited at the entry level because barriers to participation are near zero. And when supply is infinite, the price of that supply trends toward the floor. Not immediately. You need an adoption phase where you buff both sides of the market with subsidized fares and inflated driver pay to build network effects. But once the network is established, the buffs get quietly nerfed. The platform gradually extracts more from each transaction because neither side has a viable alternative. Rideshare went from taking 10% in 2012 to taking 40% on average by 2024. That's not inflation. That's not rising costs. That's market power being exercised in a system specifically designed to accumulate it. And the numbers people cite to make the gig economy look like it's working? They're real, but they're doing something specific. When you hear that 5.6 million independent workers now earn over $100,000 a year, that's true. But those earners are overwhelmingly in high-skill knowledge work, software development, consulting, specialized design. They're freelancers, not gig workers in any meaningful platform-dependent sense. Lumping a senior software consultant billing $150 an hour with a delivery driver netting $14 an hour under the same gig economy umbrella is like averaging a CEO's salary with line workers and calling it a healthy labor market. The aggregate number is technically accurate and structurally misleading. Only about 15% of gig workers report platform work as their primary income source. More than half say they do it to supplement a traditional job or to fill gaps. This isn't a workforce that chose independence. It's a workforce using gig platforms as a pressure valve for insufficient primary income. The platform didn't create wealth for these workers. It monetized their need. So who actually benefits from this architecture? The platforms, obviously, once they reach scale and start tightening take rates. But also any industry that needs flexible labor without employment obligations. The gig model gave companies a template for converting fixed labor costs into variable ones. You see it spreading beyond rideshare and delivery into warehousing, healthcare staffing, even white-collar project work. The pattern is consistent. Promise flexibility, absorb the worker's desire for autonomy, then min-max the economics, minimize platform costs, maximize platform take, because the platform controls the algorithm, and the algorithm controls the market. The EU recognized this structural problem. By December 2026, all member states must implement the Platform Work Directive, which grants full employment rights and benefits to millions of gig workers. In the US, Congress introduced the Empowering App-Based Workers Act in 2025, which would cap platform take rates at 25% and require companies to disclose their per-trip cut to both drivers and passengers. Whether these pass or not, the fact that they exist tells you something. Governments are beginning to treat platform labor not as innovation, but as a regulatory problem. None of this means gig work is inherently broken. Freelancing, contracting, project-based work, these have always existed, and for skilled workers with leverage, they can pay extremely well. The issue isn't flexibility itself. The issue is a specific platform architecture that uses flexibility as a user acquisition strategy while building a system that systematically transfers value from labor to intermediary. Understanding the difference between I choose to work independently and a platform algorithm determines my earnings while I bear all operating costs is the difference between actual economic agency and a very convincing simulation of it. If this kind of systems breakdown changes how you think about the gig economy or any financial system you thought you understood, subscribe to 8-Bit Economics. Every week, we strip complex financial mechanisms down to their core architecture. No hype, no predictions, just the underlying code. Hit subscribe, drop a like if this shifted your thinking, and leave a comment with your take. By the time everyone sees it coming, the smart play is already over. The gig economy's greatest innovation wasn't connecting workers with customers. That technology existed before any of these platforms launched. The innovation was building a labor system where the intermediary captures 40% of the value, bears none of the operating cost, and calls it empowerment. That's not a marketplace. That's an extraction engine with a very good marketing department. And the 70 million people plugged into it aren't entrepreneurs. They're the resource being mined.